They found his kingdom 3 days after it fell. The great walls that had stood for 500 years were nothing but rubble and ash. The throne room where he'd ruled with an iron fist was now a crater filled with silver fire that wouldn't die. And at the center of it all, where his throne used to be, was a single message burned into the stone in letters 10 feet high. You should have let me die. My name is Alara Nightshade, and 6 months ago, my mate, Alpha King Rowan Blackthorn, dragged me into the Deadlands and left me to die. He thought he was getting rid of a weakness, a liability, a mate who couldn't give him the powerful heirs he demanded. What he actually did was wake up something that should have stayed buried, something ancient, something that his ancestors spent centuries trying to destroy. I didn't just survive the Deadlands. I became something far worse than anything that lived there, and when I walked out of that cursed place, I had one single purpose burning in my soul. Make him pay. Make them all pay. Watch his precious kingdom crumble to dust while he screamed my name. This is the story of how I went from a dying, broken Luna to the silver goddess of destruction. And trust me, by the end of this hour, you'll understand why the werewolf world will never forget the name Alara Nightshade. Before we begin this journey of ultimate revenge and divine retribution, I want to say how much it means to have you here with us at Alpha Destiny Tales. We're building something incredible together, a community that loves powerful transformation stories, and your support in helping us reach our first 1,000 subscribers would mean everything. Now, let me take you back to the night my entire world shattered, the night Rowan decided I was disposable. The palace gardens were beautiful that night. I remember thinking that as Rowan took my hand and led me down the moonlit path toward the south gate. The jasmine was blooming, filling the air with that sweet, heady scent that always made me feel safe. The fountain in the center courtyard was playing its endless song, water dancing over marble in patterns that had soothed generations of Blackthorn Lunas before me. Everything was perfect. Everything was exactly as it should be, except for the coldness in my mate's eyes, except for the way his hand gripped mine just a little too tight, his fingers pressing into my wrist until I could feel my pulse hammering against his palm, except for the 3 guards following us at a distance, their faces carefully blank, their hands resting on weapons they shouldn't need in their own palace. I should have known something was wrong. Should have felt it through the mate bond, that golden thread that was supposed to connect us soul to soul. But the bond had been quiet for months, ever since the healers told us the truth I'd been desperately trying to hide. I was barren, cursed by some ancient magic that had twisted through my bloodline, leaving my womb as cold and dead as winter earth. I couldn't give Rowan children, couldn't give the Blackthorn pack the heirs they needed to continue their dynasty. And in the werewolf world, a Luna who couldn't produce heirs was worse than useless. She was a liability. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light even as fear started crawling up my spine like ice water. "Rowan, the south gate leads to the Deadlands. We shouldn't be out here after dark." He didn't answer, just kept walking, his grip tightening even more until I felt something in my wrist crack. I gasped, tried to pull away, but his other hand shot out and grabbed my arm, holding me in place with brutal strength. "Rowan, you're hurting me." "Good," he said, and his voice was so cold, so empty of anything resembling the man I'd married 3 years ago, that my blood turned to ice. "You should hurt. You should suffer for what you've done to me, to this pack, to my legacy." The south gate loomed ahead of us, massive iron bars that had been sealed shut for decades. The Deadlands beyond were forbidden territory, a cursed wasteland where magic had gone wrong centuries ago and twisted everything it touched. Nothing lived there. Nothing survived. It was a place where werewolves sent their worst criminals to die, where the very air would strip flesh from bone, and the ground would drink blood like wine. The guards moved ahead and began unlocking the gate. The sound of old iron grinding against itself echoed through the night like the growl of some massive beast. I started struggling in earnest then, my wolf rising up inside me with a snarl of panic. "What are you doing? Rowan, what is this?" He spun me around to face him, and the look in his eyes froze me more completely than any physical restraint could have. There was nothing there. No love, no regret, not even anger. Just cold, calculated disgust. "You failed me, Alara. Failed in your most basic duty as Luna. I need heirs, and you're nothing but a broken vessel that can't even fulfill that one simple purpose." The words hit me like physical blows. Each one landed with brutal precision, cutting through every defense I'd built up over the months of trying to fix myself, trying to find some cure for my condition, trying to be good enough for him despite my failing. I tried, I whispered, hating how my voice cracked. I tried everything. Every healer, every ritual, every remedy. I'm still trying to find a way. I don't care about your trying, he snarled. I care about results. And you've given me nothing but embarrassment and wasted time. The other alphas mock me behind my back. Did you know that? They whisper about how the great Rowan Blackthorn can't even get his mate pregnant, about how maybe I'm the one who's weak. His hand moved to my throat, not quite squeezing but resting there as a threat, a promise of violence barely restrained. I've found a solution, though. Callista Moonfire has agreed to be my new Luna. She's young, fertile, and from a powerful bloodline. She'll give me the strong heirs I need. But first, I need to clear away the dead weight. Understanding crashed over me like a wave of frozen water. This wasn't just rejection. This wasn't even just exile. He was going to kill me. Throw me into the Deadlands and let that cursed place do his dirty work so his hands stayed clean. You can't, I gasped, my wolf thrashing inside me in terror. The mate bond. It'll kill you if I die. He smiled, and it was the cruelest thing I'd ever seen. The healers have found a way to sever the bond completely. Oh, it'll hurt for a while, but I'll survive. You, on the other hand, won't last the night out there. The guards had the gate open now. Beyond it, I could see the Deadlands stretching out under the moon, a landscape of twisted black trees and earth that seemed to writhe like it was alive. Even from here, I could feel the wrongness radiating from that place, the way it pulled at something deep inside me, trying to drag me toward it like gravity. Please, I begged, and I wasn't ashamed of the tears streaming down my face. Please don't do this. I love you. We can find another way. I'll step aside, let you take another mate, whatever you want. Just don't kill me. For a moment, just a heartbeat. Something flickered in his eyes, something that might have been regret or guilt, or the ghost of the love he'd once claimed to feel for me. But then it was gone, snuffed out like a candle in the wind. I already have taken another mate, he said flatly. The bonding ceremony was this morning. That's what the healers were doing, severing our connection and forging a new one with Callista. You're not my Luna anymore, Alara. You're nothing. He shoved me toward the gate, and I stumbled, my legs giving out. I hit the ground hard, palms scraping against stone, and before I could get up, he was there, dragging me by my hair toward that opening, toward the Deadlands, toward death. I screamed, fought with everything I had. My wolf tried to shift, tried to give me the strength to break free, but Rowan's beta stepped forward and jabbed something into my neck. Wolf's bane. Liquid fire poured through my veins, and my wolf's presence vanished like smoke, leaving me human and helpless in a world where that meant prey. They dragged me through the gate. The moment I crossed the threshold into the Deadlands, agony exploded through every nerve in my body. It felt like being burned alive and frozen solid at the same time, like every cell was being torn apart and reassembled wrong. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but scream. Goodbye, Alara. Rowan's voice came from behind me, distant and cold. I'd say I'm sorry, but I'm really not. You were always too weak for this world. The gate slammed shut with a sound like the closing of a tomb. I heard the locks engaging, heard their footsteps retreating, heard the sound of my own sobbing echoing in the darkness. And then I heard nothing but the Deadlands themselves, whispering in voices that scraped against my mind like claws on stone. I don't know how long I lay there. Time moved strangely in that place, stretching and contracting like something alive and malicious. The ground beneath me felt wrong, too soft in some places and too hard in others, pulsing with a rhythm that matched no heartbeat I'd ever heard. The air tasted like copper and decay, and every breath I took felt like swallowing broken glass. The wolfsbane was wearing off slowly, but in the Deadlands, that almost didn't matter. My wolf was terrified, whimpering in the back of my mind like a frightened puppy. She could feel what I felt, that this place wanted us dead, wanted to consume us, wanted to add our essence to the twisted nightmare landscape that stretched in all directions. I tried to stand and made it halfway before my legs gave out again. The pain was indescribable. Every injury I'd sustained, every wound that had healed wrong, every scar I'd accumulated over years of being Rowan's punching bag when his temper got the best of him, all of it flared to life as if fresh. The Deadlands fed on pain, I realized, fed on suffering and fear and despair, and I was full of all three. Something moved in the darkness between the twisted trees, multiple somethings, circling, watching, waiting. I could see eyes glowing in the shadows, But they were wrong. Too many in each head, or arranged in patterns that hurt to look at. The creatures that lived here, if they could even be called creatures, were things that had been warped by centuries of corrupted magic. They were hungry, and I was fresh meat. I forced myself to move, crawling at first, every inch a battle against the pain and the wrongness trying to drag me down. My hands sank into the earth, and I swear I felt it trying to hold on, trying to pull me under like quicksand. I yanked free and kept moving, leaving bloody handprints behind me. Hours passed, or maybe days. I couldn't tell. The sky in the Deadlands was always the same, a sickly purple-gray that gave off just enough light to see by, but never enough to feel safe. I was dying. I knew that with certainty. My body was giving out. My mind was fragmenting, and my wolf had gone completely silent, retreating so deep inside me that I couldn't feel her anymore. This was it. This was how I died. Alone, broken, betrayed, crawling through a cursed wasteland, while my mate celebrated his new union with a woman who could give him everything I couldn't. The anger came then, not the hot, explosive rage that burns itself out quickly. This was cold, deep, the kind of anger that settles into your bones and becomes part of your DNA. Rowan had done this to me. Not the Deadlands, not fate, not the curse that had stolen my fertility. Him. He'd made the choice to throw me away, to murder me, to treat me like I was nothing. And I realized, lying there in the dirt with death circling overhead, that I didn't want to die. I wanted to live. I wanted to survive this nightmare and walk back through those gates and make him regret every single moment of what he'd done. But wanting wasn't enough. I needed power, and I had none. I was just a broken Omega who couldn't even call her wolf anymore. That's when I saw it. In the distance, barely visible through the twisted trees, something glowed with a soft silver light. It was the only thing in this entire wasteland that didn't look diseased or wrong. It called to me, not with words, but with a feeling that bypassed my conscious mind and spoke directly to something ancient sleeping in my blood. I don't remember deciding to move toward it. My body just started crawling in that direction, as if controlled by instinct older than thought. The creatures in the shadows followed, their wrong voices chittering and clicking, but they didn't attack. Maybe they sensed what I was moving toward and were afraid. Maybe they were just waiting for me to die on my own. The silver light grew stronger as I got closer. It was coming from a clearing where nothing grew, where even the corrupted earth seemed to have given up. And in the center of that clearing was a pool of liquid silver, perfectly still, reflecting the diseased sky like a mirror. I reached the edge and stared down at my reflection. I looked like death. My face was gray, my eyes sunken, my lips cracked and bleeding. This was the woman Rowan had thrown away. This was what I'd been reduced to. But as I stared, something changed. The reflection shifted, and suddenly it wasn't me looking back. It was a woman made of moonlight and silver fire, with eyes that held the weight of eternity, and a crown of starlight resting on her head. She was beautiful and terrible, and so powerful that looking at her made my chest ache. "Daughter of my blood," she said, and her voice resonated through the pool, through the ground, through my very bones. "You have suffered enough. You have endured more than any soul should have to bear. And now, you have a choice." I tried to speak, but couldn't make my voice work. The woman smiled sadly. "You can lie down and die here, and I will carry your soul to peace. You've earned rest, child. No one would fault you for accepting it." She paused, and her eyes seemed to glow brighter. "Or you can drink from my pool, take my power into yourself, and rise as something new, something ancient, something that will make your enemies tremble and kingdoms fall." She leaned closer, until her face was inches from mine, separated only by the surface of the silver liquid. "But know this. If you drink, if you take my power, there is no going back. You will become my vessel, my vengeance against a world that has forgotten the old ways. You will have the strength to destroy everything that hurt you, but you will also carry the burden of that destruction. Blood will stain your hands. Death will follow your footsteps. And the woman you were, the gentle Luna, who wanted nothing but love and family, she will die in this moment, as surely as your body would have." I looked at my reflection again, at the broken, dying woman I'd become. Rowan's words echoed in my head. "You were always too weak for this world. I don't want to be weak anymore," I whispered. The goddess smiled, and it was fierce and proud and full of dark promise. "Then drink, daughter. Drink and be reborn in silver and fury. I plunged my hands into the pool. The liquid was cold, so cold it burned, but I scooped it up and brought it to my lips anyway. The moment it touched my tongue, power exploded through me like lightning. My back arched, my mouth opened in a scream that came out as silver light, and every cell in my body ignited with pain and ecstasy and transformation. I could feel myself dying, feel the woman I'd been, Alara Nightshade, fragile Luna of the Blackthorn Pack, burning away like paper in a fire, and in her place, something else was being forged, something harder, something that wouldn't break no matter how much force was applied to it. My wolf returned, but she was different, larger, stronger. Her fur wasn't brown anymore, but silver shot through with veins of pure light. When she howled inside my mind, the sound made the twisted trees around us shudder, and the corrupted creatures flee in terror. The goddess's power poured into me like a river, and I drank and drank until I thought I would burst. I could feel memories that weren't mine flooding my consciousness. I saw the ancient wars between the old gods and the werewolf kings, saw how the silver goddess had been betrayed, sealed away, her power scattered, and her name erased from history because the Alphas feared what she represented: freedom, power that didn't bow to their hierarchy, a force that could unmake kingdoms as easily as breathing, and now that power was mine. When I finally pulled my hands from the pool, the liquid clung to my skin, soaking in through my pores, becoming part of me. The wounds that had covered my body healed in seconds, flesh knitting back together without scars. My broken wrist straightened with a crack that should have hurt, but felt like relief. My sunken cheeks filled out, my cracked lips smoothed, and when I looked down at my reflection now, I saw something that made my breath catch. I was beautiful, not in the soft, gentle way I'd been before, but in the way that storms are beautiful, dangerous, inevitable, divine. My hair had turned silver at the roots, the color spreading down the length until it matched the liquid I'd drunk from. My eyes glowed with inner light, shifting between gray and silver depending on the angle. My skin had taken on a faint luminescence, as if moonlight lived just beneath the surface. And when I stood, I felt no pain, no weakness, only power thrumming through every fiber of my being, demanding to be used, begging to be unleashed on the world that had tried to destroy me. The goddess's voice whispered in my mind one last time. Go, daughter. Return to the world of wolves and alphas. Show them what happens when they cast aside the sacred. Teach them fear, and when you stand in the ruins of his kingdom, remember that mercy is a gift, and he gave you none. I turned toward the iron gates in the distance, toward the palace beyond, toward Rowan and his new Luna, and the pack that had watched him throw me away without protest. They thought I was dead. Thought I was just another forgotten Luna who'd failed her purpose and been disposed of. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The Deadlands parted before me as I walked, the corrupted earth smoothing itself, the twisted trees bending away, the nightmare creatures bowing their malformed heads. This place recognized power when it saw it, and what walked through it now was so far beyond anything it had ever encountered, that even this cursed land knew to show respect. I reached the gates and placed my hand against the iron. Silver light spread from my palm, racing along the metal in branching patterns. The locks didn't just open, they dissolved, centuries-old metal turning to dust at my touch. The gates themselves groaned and fell, crashing to the ground with a sound like thunder. I stepped through, out of the Deadlands and back into the world of the living. The difference was immediate and stark. The air was clean, the earth was solid and real, and in the distance, I could see the lights of the Blackthorn Palace glittering like false jewels in the night. My wolf stirred inside me, and I felt her hunger, her rage, her absolute need for vengeance. We were in agreement, completely, utterly. What we were about to do would be terrible, and beautiful, and absolutely necessary. I looked up at the moon, full and bright and clean, and felt the goddess's presence wrap around me like a cloak. She was with me, in me. We were one being now, mortal and divine fused into something unprecedented. I'm coming, Rowan, I whispered to the wind, and knew somehow that he would feel it, a shiver down his spine, a moment of inexplicable dread. And I'm bringing your kingdom down around your ears. I didn't go directly to the palace. That would have been foolish. And whatever else I was now, I wasn't a fool anymore. The power thrumming through my veins demanded action, begged me to storm the gates and start my vengeance immediately, but the goddess's ancient wisdom tempered that impulse with patience. Rowan had an army, hundreds of trained warriors who would die for him not out of love, but out of the rigid pack hierarchy that bound them to his will. I was powerful, yes, but I needed to be strategic. Besides, there was something else I needed to do first, someone I needed to find. The Forest of Whispers lay 3 miles north of the palace, a place where magic still ran free and wild, untamed by the alphas who tried to control everything within their territories. It was here that the outcasts gathered, the wolves who'd been exiled or rejected, the ones who'd refused to bow to the pack structure and paid the price for their defiance. If I was going to tear down Rowan's kingdom, I would need allies. And what better allies than wolves who already hated him? I moved through the forest like a ghost, my new power making me nearly invisible when I wanted to be. The trees seemed to lean toward me as I passed, their branches brushing against my silver hair as if in greeting. Animals that should have fled from a predator instead watched me with curious, unafraid eyes. I was beyond their natural order now, something that existed outside the food chain, outside the normal rules of survival. The outcast camp was exactly where my newly enhanced senses told me it would be, hidden in a clearing protected by amateur wards and desperate hope. There were perhaps 50 wolves here, living in makeshift shelters, their clothes ragged and their faces hollow with hunger and hardship. These were Rowan's rejects, the ones he deemed unworthy of his perfect kingdom. I stepped into the clearing, and immediately every head turned toward me. Wolves tensed, some shifting partially, claws and fangs emerging in defensive threat. They didn't recognize me, not yet, but they recognized power when they saw it. A woman stepped forward, older, scarred, with gray streaking through her dark hair. I remembered her vaguely from my time in the palace. Mira. She'd been exiled 5 years ago for speaking out against Rowan's decision to execute Omega pups who showed weakness. She'd tried to protect children, and he'd thrown her out for it. "Who are you?" Mira demanded, her voice rough but steady. "This is neutral ground. We don't want trouble." I let my power flare just slightly, let them feel what I was. Silver light danced across my skin, and my eyes glowed bright enough to cast shadows. Several wolves gasped, and one fell to his knees immediately. "I know you," I said, and was pleased to hear that my voice carried an echo now, as if 2 beings spoke in harmony. Mira Greyfang, exiled for daring to have a conscience, for believing that strength shouldn't mean cruelty. Her eyes widened. "How do you know my name? How do you know what happened?" I smiled, and saw her shiver at the expression. "Because I was there. I was the Luna who stood silent while Rowan passed his judgment. I was the coward who didn't speak up for you because I was too afraid of losing his approval." Understanding dawned on her face, followed quickly by disbelief. Ilara Nightshade? But you're dead. Rowan said you died of a wasting sickness. Is that the story he told?" I laughed, and the sound made several wolves back away nervously. "No, Mira. He dragged me to the Deadlands and threw me in to die because I couldn't give him the heirs his pride demanded. He left me to be consumed by that cursed place. And he would have succeeded, except the Deadlands had something waiting for me. I let my full transformation show, silver light blazing from every pore, my hair rising on an invisible wind, my eyes burning with divine fire. The silver goddess found me dying in that wasteland, and she offered me a choice, death or rebirth as her vessel of vengeance. I think you can see which one I chose. The entire camp had gone silent now, every eye fixed on me with expressions ranging from terror to awe, to desperate, fragile hope. "I've come back from death itself," I continued, my voice carrying to every corner of the clearing. "And I'm going to destroy everything Rowan Blackthorn has built. I'm going to tear down his palace stone by stone. I'm going to shatter his kingdom and scatter his pack to the 4 winds. I'm going to make him suffer as I suffered, lose everything as I lost everything, and die knowing that he created his own destruction when he threw me away." I paused, looking at each face in turn. "But I can't do it alone. I'm powerful, yes, but even goddesses need loyal hands to carry out their will. So I'm offering you a choice, the same choice I was given. You can stay here, hiding in the forest, surviving on scraps and living in fear, or you can join me, drink from my power, become something more than you are, and help me burn the kingdom that cast you out." Mira was the first to speak. "What you're describing is war. You're talking about attacking the most powerful alpha in the territory. Even with goddess power, the cost in lives would be enormous. The cost has already been paid," I said coldly. "Rowan paid it when he chose cruelty over mercy, power over compassion, Pride over love. Now he reaps what he sowed. A younger wolf stepped forward, barely more than a boy, with burns covering half his face. "He did this to me," the boy said, pointing to his scars. "Punishment for stealing food when I was starving." He held my face to hot coals and laughed while I screamed. Others began speaking up, sharing their stories of abuse, of exile, of watching loved ones die because Rowan deemed them unworthy of the pack's resources. With each story, I felt my power surge higher, fed by their pain, their rage, their desperate need for justice. "I'm in," Mira said finally. "Whatever you need from me, whatever this costs, I'm with you." "And me," the burned boy said. "And me. And me." One by one, every wolf in that clearing pledged themselves to me, to my cause, to the destruction of Rowan's kingdom. And as they did, I felt something snap into place, a connection forming between us that was like the pack bond but deeper, more primal. They were mine now, bound to me through choice and power and shared purpose. "Then drink," I said, calling water from the earth, pulling moisture from the air itself until it pooled in the center of the clearing. I blessed it with my power, watched it turn silver and luminous, a pale echo of the goddess's pool in the Deadlands. "Drink and be transformed. Drink and become my army of vengeance." They came forward one by one, cupping their hands and bringing the silver water to their lips. And as they drank, I watched them change. Their wounds healed. Their weakened bodies grew strong. Their eyes began to glow with that same silver light that burned in mine. They were still themselves, still individual wolves with their own minds and wills. But they were also connected to me now, drawing on a fraction of my power, becoming extensions of my divine rage. By the time the sun rose, I had an army. Not a large one, not yet, but 50 wolves transformed by goddess power into something that could stand against Rowan's trained warriors. It was a start. We spent the next week preparing. I taught them to channel the power I'd given them, to move faster than normal wolves, to hit harder, to heal from wounds that should have been fatal. Mira, it turned out, had tactical knowledge from her years as a warrior before her exile. She helped me plan our assault, identifying weaknesses in the palace defenses, suggesting targets that would cause maximum disruption. But more than that, I spent time learning the full extent of what I'd become. The goddess's power wasn't just physical strength or magical ability. It was knowledge, centuries of accumulated wisdom about magic and warfare, and the hidden weaknesses of alphas who'd grown too confident in their dominance. I learned that I could sense emotions now, feel the fear and anger and desire of everyone around me like a physical touch. I could manipulate silver, calling it from the earth, shaping it into weapons or shields or chains. I could move through shadows when I chose, appearing and disappearing like a ghost. And most importantly, I could break pack bonds, that sacred connection that tied wolves to their alphas, severing it with a touch and leaving them free to choose their own loyalty. That last ability was going to be key to everything. On the 7th night after my transformation, I gathered my army in the clearing and laid out the plan. Tomorrow, we strike. Not at the palace itself, not yet. We're going to hit the outer territories first, the villages and outposts that feed resources into Rowan's kingdom. We're going to break his supply lines, free his enslaved Omegas, and give every wolf in his territory a choice. Join us, or watch everything they've built turn to ash. What about civilian casualties? Mira asked. There are innocent wolves in those villages, people who've never hurt anyone. I met her eyes, and I saw her flinch at what she saw in mine. I don't want to hurt innocents, but I won't hold back to protect those who chose to stand with him. If they fight us, they die. If they surrender, I'll break their pack bond and let them choose their own fate. But I will not show mercy to anyone who actively defends Rowan's regime. It was harsh. I knew that. The old Alara would have been horrified at such cold pragmatism, but the old Alara was dead, burned away in the goddess's silver fire. What remained was something that understood that sometimes destruction was necessary for rebirth, that sometimes you had to burn the forest to let new growth emerge. We moved out at midnight, 50 silver-eyed wolves running through the darkness, like a storm given form. Our first target was Black Ridge Village, a mining settlement that provided the iron and silver that funded Rowan's army. It was protected by 20 warriors, well-trained but unprepared for what we'd become. We hit them fast and brutal. I led the charge myself, silver light blazing from my hands as I tore through their defenses like they were paper. Warriors who'd trained their entire lives fell before me in seconds, their weapons shattering against shields of solidified moonlight, their strongest attacks bouncing off my skin like rain. The fight, if you could even call it that, lasted less than 5 minutes. By the end, 15 warriors were dead, and the surviving 5 had surrendered, falling to their knees and baring their throats in submission. I walked to each of them in turn and placed my hand on their heads. I felt the pack bond connecting them to Rowan, thick cords of magical compulsion that demanded obedience and punished defiance. With a thought and a surge of power, I severed those cords, cutting them free. They gasped as the bond broke, their eyes wide with shock and something that might have been relief. For the first time in their lives, they were truly free to choose their own loyalty. "You have 2 options," I told them. "Join us and help tear down the tyrant who enslaved you to his will. Or walk away, leave this territory, and never look back. But if you try to warn Rowan, if you try to stop what's coming, I will hunt you down and make your death last days." 4 of them pledged to me immediately. The 5th, an older wolf with gray in his beard, chose to leave. I let him go, watched him disappear into the forest, and hoped he was smart enough to keep running. We freed the Omega miners, breaking their bonds and offering them the same choice. Most joined us. Some fled. None tried to stop us. By dawn, Blackridge Village was empty, its resources claimed for our cause, its defenders either dead or converted, and we were just getting started. Over the next 2 weeks, we hit 6 more villages. Each time we grew stronger. Each time more of Rowan's wolves chose freedom over forced loyalty. Each time his kingdom shrank a little more. Word spread, of course. You can't wage a guerrilla war without people noticing. Refugees fleeing the fighting carried tales of the Silver Goddess and her army of the exiled. They spoke of a Luna who'd risen from death, who glowed with divine light, who could kill with a touch or free with a gesture. Some of the stories were exaggerated. Some weren't exaggerated enough. I'd become something of a legend in the span of 2 weeks. A ghost story that haunted Rowan's territories. A promise of vengeance that kept his warriors looking over their shoulders. And in his palace, I knew, Rowan was finally starting to understand that I wasn't dead, that I was coming for him, that everything he'd built was about to come crashing down. I could feel him through the severed mate bond sometimes, the ghost of our connection carrying echoes of his emotions, fear, rage, disbelief, and underneath it all, a growing horror as he realized what he'd created when he threw me into the Deadlands. Good. Let him be afraid. Let him lie awake at night wondering when I would come for him. Let him feel a fraction of the terror I'd felt when he dragged me to my death. By the end of the 2nd week, my army had grown from 50 wolves to over 300. We controlled a quarter of his territory. His supply lines were in shambles. His outer defenses were gone. And the palace itself stood isolated, a fortress that was starting to look more like a prison with each passing day. It was time to move to the next phase. Time to take the fight directly to his doorstep and let him see what I'd become. Time to watch his perfect kingdom burn. The night we marched on the palace, the moon was full and bright, hanging in the sky like a silver coin. I took that as a sign from the goddess, her approval of what was about to happen. My army moved in silence, 300 strong, each wolf's eyes glowing with borrowed divine power. We were a river of silver light flowing through the darkness, beautiful and terrible, and absolutely inevitable. Rowan's palace sat on a hill overlooking the capital city, its white stone walls gleaming in the moonlight. It had been built 500 years ago by his ancestors, designed to be both a symbol of power and an impregnable fortress. 30-foot walls, guard towers every 50 feet, 3 sets of gates, each reinforced with iron and magic. An army of 500 warriors trained from birth to defend their alpha to the death. Under normal circumstances, it would have taken an army 10 times our size to even attempt a siege, but these weren't normal circumstances, and I wasn't interested in a conventional assault. I raised my hand, and my army stopped at the edge of the forest, still hidden by shadows and distance. From here, we could see the palace clearly, could see the guards on the walls, could see the lights in the windows, where Rowan and his new Luna no doubt slept peacefully, believing themselves safe. "Mira," I said quietly, and she appeared at my side immediately. "Take half the army and circle around to the west gate. When you hear my signal, hit them hard and fast. I want chaos. I want them confused and scared and unable to coordinate a defense." "What will you be doing?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. I smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "I'm going through the front door. I left Mira to organize her forces and walked forward alone, stepping out of the forest's concealment and into the open ground before the palace's main gate. Immediately, alarms began to sound. Guards shouted warnings, and I could see archers lining up on the walls, their bows drawn and aimed at my heart. I didn't slow down. Didn't stop. Just kept walking with calm, measured steps, my power building with each stride until I was practically glowing in the darkness, a beacon of silver light that probably looked like a star had fallen to earth. "Halt!" The captain of the guard's voice boomed from the wall. I recognized him, Gareth Ironfang, one of Rowan's most loyal warriors. "State your business or be shot down." I stopped perhaps 50 yards from the gate and looked up at him with my glowing eyes. "My business is with your alpha. Tell Rowan Blackthorn that his dead wife has come home." The shocked silence that followed was delicious. I could see Gareth's face, even at this distance, watch as recognition and disbelief warred across his features. "Ilara, but the Alpha said you died?" I finished for him. "Yes, he tried very hard to make that happen, dragged me to the Deadlands, and left me to be consumed by that cursed place. But death didn't want me, Gareth. The Silver Goddess did, and now I've come to collect what's owed." "You're lying," Gareth said, but his voice shook. "Some kind of trick or illusion. The Luna is dead. Then I suppose you have nothing to fear from me," I replied, and let my power explode outward. Silver light erupted from my body like a shockwave, racing across the ground toward the palace. When it hit the walls, ancient stone began to crack. The magical wards that protected the fortress, powerful enchantments that had been maintained for centuries, shattered like glass, and every wolf within the palace grounds felt it, felt the touch of divine power washing over them like a wave, stripping away all pretense and forcing them to confront the truth. I was real, I was powerful, and I was here to destroy them. Gareth recovered first, years of training overriding his shock. "Fire!" he screamed, and dozens of arrows were loosed simultaneously. I didn't bother to dodge. The arrows turned to silver dust before they reached me, disintegrating in the aura of power that surrounded me. I reached out with my hand and made a pulling gesture, and the main gate, solid iron that weighed several tons, tore free from its moorings with a scream of tortured metal. It flew through the air and crashed into the courtyard beyond, crushing unfortunate guards who hadn't moved fast enough. The palace defenses descended into chaos. Warriors poured from the barracks, forming up in defensive formations, but they didn't know where to position themselves. I could see the confusion, the fear, the way they kept looking to their officers for orders that weren't coming fast enough. That's when Mira struck from the west, her forces hitting the secondary gate in a coordinated assault. The defenders, already rattled by my display of power, broke almost immediately. Some fought and died. Others threw down their weapons and ran. A few, the smart ones, fell to their knees and bared their throats in submission. I walked through the shattered main gate like I owned the place, which, in a way, I supposed I did. This had been my home once, before Rowan decided I was disposable. Now it was going to be his tomb. Warriors rushed me in groups, trying to overwhelm me with numbers. It didn't work. I moved through them like water through paper, my silver power manifesting as blades that cut through armor and flesh with equal ease. I wasn't even using my full strength, wasn't even trying particularly hard, but they fell before me anyway, broken and bleeding and unable to comprehend what they were facing. Some I killed, the ones who attacked with real intent, with hatred in their eyes, who would never stop fighting until they were dead. Others I merely incapacitated, breaking bones or severing tendons, leaving them alive but unable to continue the fight. And for those who surrendered, those who threw down their weapons and begged for mercy, I did what I'd done in the villages. I broke their pack bonds. Each time I severed that connection, each time I freed a wolf from Rowan's forced loyalty, I felt my power grow stronger. The goddess had told me that every slave freed would add to my strength. Every chain broken would forge me into something more divine. I was beginning to understand what she'd meant. The palace defenders weren't prepared for this kind of assault. They'd trained for conventional warfare, for enemy armies and siege tactics. They had no defense against someone who could walk through walls, who could break their sacred bonds with a touch, who could kill them without even drawing a weapon. Within an hour, the outer defenses had fallen. My army controlled the courtyard, the barracks, the outer walls. Rowan's warriors who'd survived had either fled into the palace proper or surrendered to my forces. The once impregnable fortress had been breached, and now only the keep itself remained. That's where Rowan would be. In his throne room, probably, surrounded by his elite guard, desperately trying to figure out how to stop what was coming. I let him wait a little longer, let the fear build, let him hear the sounds of his kingdom falling around him. Then, and only then, did I approach the doors to the keep. They were massive things, oak reinforced with iron bands, engraved with protective runes that were supposed to keep out hostile magic. I placed my hand against the wood and channeled my power, watched the runes flare bright for a moment before burning out completely. The doors exploded inward, torn from their hinges by invisible force. The keep's interior was exactly as I remembered. Grand halls lined with portraits of Blackthorn ancestors, rich carpets that cost more than most wolves earned in a lifetime, gold and silver decorations that screamed wealth and power and dominance. It was all going to burn. I walked through those halls, leaving silver footprints behind me, power seeping into the stone itself, marking the palace as mine. Guards tried to stop me, and died. Servants fled before me, and I let them go. I had no quarrel with them. They were just victims of the same system that had destroyed me. Finally, I reached the throne room doors. I could feel Rowan on the other side, his presence like a storm of fear and rage and desperate determination. He knew I was coming, knew what I was going to do, and he was terrified. Good. I opened the doors, and there he was, Rowan Blackthorn, Alpha King, sitting on his throne with his 20 remaining elite guards arrayed before him. And beside him, looking pale and terrified, was Callista Moonfire, the woman who'd taken my place as Luna. She was beautiful, I noticed distantly. Young, barely 20, with golden hair and green eyes, and the kind of delicate features that men wrote poetry about. She was everything I wasn't. Fertile, weak, easily controlled. Perfect for a tyrant who wanted a wife who wouldn't challenge him. "Hello, husband," I said, and my voice echoed through the throne room like thunder. "Miss me?" Rowan stood, and I had to give him credit. He didn't let his fear show on his face. He was still playing the strong alpha, the unshakable king. "You should be dead. I threw you into the Deadlands. Nothing survives that place. Nothing human," I agreed. "Nothing normal. But I was never normal, Rowan. You just never bothered to look deep enough to see it. The goddess's blood ran in my veins, dormant, waiting for the right catalyst to wake it up." I took a step forward, and all 20 guards immediately shifted into defensive positions. "And you provided that catalyst when you tried to murder me. Funny how that works, isn't it? Your cruelty created the very thing that's going to destroy you." "I did what was necessary," he said, his voice hard. "You were a weakness. A failed Luna who couldn't provide the one thing I needed most. Heirs," I said softly. "You needed heirs to validate your power, to prove to the other alphas that you were strong and virile and worthy of your crown. And when I couldn't give you that, you threw me away like garbage." I let my power flare, filling the throne room with silver light. Several guards whimpered and backed away despite their training. But here's what you never understood, Rowan. True power doesn't come from forcing others to submit. It doesn't come from cruelty or dominance or treating lives as disposable. It comes from this. I gestured, and silver chains erupted from the floor, wrapping around each guard, binding them in place. They struggled, but the chains were unbreakable, forged from solidified divine power. From the fury of those you've wronged, from the vengeance of those you've betrayed, from the goddess herself, reaching through time and death to punish those who've forgotten the old ways. Rowan's mask finally cracked, fear breaking through his false confidence. "What do you want? Revenge? Fine. Kill me if you must. But spare my pack. Spare Callista. They've done nothing to you." I laughed, and the sound was bitter and cold. "Nothing? Your pack watched while you dragged me to my death. They stood silent while you murdered me. And her?" I looked at Callista, saw her shrink back against the throne. "She took you into her bed knowing you'd just disposed of your mate. She benefited from my death. So no, Rowan. I won't spare anyone. Please," Callista whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know. He told me you died of sickness. I wouldn't have agreed if I'd known." "Wouldn't you?" I interrupted. "Would you really have turned down the chance to be Luna? To have power and status and a king at your side? Don't lie to me, little wolf. Don't pretend you're innocent when you were all too happy to take what wasn't yours to claim." I turned back to Rowan. "I'm not going to kill you. Not yet. First, you're going to watch everything you built fall to pieces. Your kingdom is already gone. Your territories claimed by my army. Your warriors are dead or freed from your control. And now, this palace, the symbol of your power, the legacy of 500 years of Blackthorn rule. I raised my hands, and silver fire began to spread across the walls, consuming everything it touched but generating no heat. It was cold fire, the kind that burned through magic and bonds, and the very concept of kingship itself is going to burn. The silver fire spread through the palace like a living thing, consuming 5 centuries of history in a matter of minutes. I watched Rowan's face as it happened, watched him realize that everything his ancestors had built, everything he'd sacrificed for, all of it was turning to ash and ruin. The portraits of past kings blistered and burned. The throne itself, carved from ancient oak and inlaid with gold, began to crack and splinter. The very stones of the walls started to crumble, unable to withstand the divine power eating away at them. "Stop this," Rowan begged, and hearing him beg was sweeter than anything I could have imagined. "Please, Alara. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I should never have done what I did. Just stop this madness and we can talk. We can find a solution." "A solution?" I laughed, and there was no humor in it, only bitter rage. "You want a solution now? Where were your solutions when I was dying in the Deadlands? Where was your mercy when I begged you not to kill me?" I walked toward him, each step measured and deliberate, power crackling around me like a storm barely contained. His guards were still wrapped in my silver chains, unable to move, unable to protect their king. He was alone, exposed, helpless before me, just as I'd been before him. "You said I was weak," I continued, stopping just a few feet away from his throne. "Said I was common, unsuitable, a broken vessel not worth keeping. Do I look weak to you now, Rowan? Do I look common?" He couldn't meet my eyes, couldn't face what he'd created. "No," he whispered. "Louder," I commanded, and my voice boomed with divine authority. "No," he shouted, finally looking up at me. "You're not weak. You're powerful, terrifying. Please just tell me what you want. What can I do to make this right?" "There is no making this right," I said softly. "Some things, once broken, can never be repaired. Some betrayals are too deep to forgive. You didn't just reject me, Rowan. You tried to murder me. You threw away the mate the moon goddess herself chose for you, because your pride couldn't handle having a Luna who wasn't perfect by your impossible standards." I reached out and grabbed his throat, lifting him from his throne with one hand. He was a big man, heavily muscled, trained to fight since childhood. But in my grip, he was as helpless as a child. The silver fire racing through the palace gathered around us, creating a cocoon of cold flame that illuminated his terrified face in stark detail. "I could kill you now," I said, watching him struggle uselessly against my hold. "Snap your neck, or burn you from the inside out. It would be easy, satisfying, but that would be mercy, and you gave me none." I released him, let him fall back onto his crumbling throne. He gasped for air, his hands going to his throat where my fingers had left silver marks on his skin. "Instead, I'm going to do to you what you did to me. I'm going to take everything from you. Your kingdom is gone. Your palace is falling around you. Your warriors are dead or freed from your control. And now, I'm going to take the last thing you have left." I turned to face Callista, who'd been watching this entire exchange with wide, horrified eyes. "Your precious new Luna, your fertile replacement who was supposed to give you the heirs I couldn't." "No," Rowan said, his voice breaking. "Please, not her. She's innocent in this. Punish me, not her." "Interesting," I mused. "You do care about someone other than yourself. That's almost touching." I walked toward Callista, who shrank back, but had nowhere to run. "Don't worry, little wolf. I'm not going to kill you. That would be too kind." I placed my hand on her stomach, and immediately I could feel it, the life growing inside her. Tiny, barely a few weeks old, but there, Rowan's heir, the child that I'd been unable to give him, the reason he'd replaced me. "You're pregnant," I said, and saw her nod tearfully. How perfect. The fertile Luna, carrying the precious Blackthorn heir. I looked back at Rowan, saw the desperate hope in his eyes, the belief that somehow I'd spare his unborn child. I channeled my power, letting it flow into Callista, and she gasped as silver light spread through her body. But I wasn't hurting her, wasn't harming the child. Instead, I was doing something else, something the goddess's knowledge whispered was possible. I was breaking the mate bond between her and Rowan. The silver light flared bright, and suddenly, Callista screamed, not in pain, but in shock and disorientation, as the connection that had bound her to Rowan shattered like glass. She fell to her knees, clutching her head, and when she looked up, Her eyes were different, clearer, free. "What did you do?" Rowan demanded, stumbling down from his throne toward her. "Callista? Callista, can you hear me?" She looked at him, and there was no love in her eyes anymore. No artificial devotion forced by magical compulsion. Just confusion and slowly dawning understanding. I bonded with you because you commanded it," she said slowly. "Because you used Alpha authority to override my will. I never wanted this. Never wanted to be Luna. You just decided I would be, and the bond made me believe it was my choice." Rowan staggered back as if she'd struck him. "No, you agreed. You wanted to be my Luna. I broke her bond," I said calmly. "Freed her from the magical compulsion you used to force her into accepting you as a mate. Turns out she never actually chose you, Rowan. You just made her think she had." The horror on his face was beautiful. I wouldn't have forced, wouldn't you?" I interrupted. "You, who threw away your true mate because she didn't meet your standards? You, who've built an entire kingdom on forcing wolves to submit to your authority? You expect me to believe you suddenly developed scruples about consent?" Callista was standing now, backing away from Rowan like he was diseased. "You forced me. All this time I thought I loved you, thought I wanted this, but it was all just compulsion, magic, control. The child," Rowan said desperately. "You're still carrying my child. That's real. That still matters. The child is cursed," I said, and both of them looked at me sharply. "Oh, don't worry, little Luna. The baby will be born healthy, strong, everything Rowan could hope for. But there's a twist." I smiled, and it was cruel. "The child will never be able to shift, never be able to access their wolf. They'll be human in a world of werewolves, weak and vulnerable, and everything Rowan despises. His perfect heir will be the very thing he threw me away for being. Damaged, broken, unsuitable." "No," Rowan whispered. "You can't. That's my child, my heir. I can, and I have. The goddess's power runs deep, Rowan. I've marked that child in the womb, cursed your bloodline the way you cursed mine with your cruelty." I turned to Callista. "You're free now, free to leave, free to raise that child however you choose. But know that you carry a living reminder of what happens when alphas think themselves above divine law." Callista looked between me and Rowan, then made her decision. She ran, fled the throne room without looking back, her hand pressed protectively over her stomach. I let her go. She'd been a victim too, in her own way, controlled and manipulated by an alpha who couldn't fathom that people weren't just tools for his use. Rowan sank to his knees amid the ruins of his throne room. The palace was crumbling around us, silver fire consuming everything, turning 500 years of dynasty into rubble and memory. His kingdom was gone, his warriors dead or freed, his new Luna fled, his unborn child cursed. Everything, absolutely everything, had been taken from him. And still, I wasn't satisfied. "You're going to live," I told him, my voice echoing with divine power. "I'm not going to give you the mercy of death. Instead, you're going to wander as a rogue, packless and powerless, watching from the shadows as I rebuild this territory into something better than you ever could have created. You're going to see wolves thriving without brutal hierarchy, without forced submission, without alphas who think they own everyone beneath them. You're going to watch the world move on and forget you ever existed. And every day, every single day for the rest of your miserable life, you're going to remember that you created your own destruction when you threw away the greatest gift you ever could have received." I raised my hand, and silver light wrapped around him. Not chains this time, but something else. A mark, burning itself into his skin, his soul, his very essence. "I'm marking you as oath-broken, as mate killer. Every wolf who sees you will know what you are, will feel the divine judgment upon you. You'll never find acceptance, never find peace. You'll live with the weight of what you've done until the day you finally die alone and forgotten." The mark settled into his skin, a silver brand in the shape of broken shackles and a shattered crown. He looked down at it and made a sound that was half sob, half scream. "Why?" he asked, his voice broken. "Why not just kill me? Why make me suffer like this?" "Because," I said, turning to leave, "you made me suffer, and turnabout, as they say, is divine justice." I walked out of the throne room, left him kneeling in the ruins of everything he'd built, and emerged into the courtyard where my army waited. 300 wolves, all with silver glowing in their eyes, all pledged to me, all free from the bonds that had once enslaved them. Mira approached, covered in blood and ash, but alive and victorious. "The palace is ours, my goddess. What are your orders?" I looked at the crumbling fortress, at the palace that had stood for half a millennium, symbol of alpha dominance and rigid hierarchy. "Let it fall," I said. "Let every stone crumble, every tower collapse." This place represented everything that's wrong with our world. It's time for something new. The silver fire had spread through every part of the palace by now. As we watched, the towers began to fall one by one, ancient stone giving way to divine power. The walls crumbled, the keep collapsed in on itself. Within an hour, there was nothing left but ruins and rubble, and somewhere in that destruction, Rowan Blackthorn knelt alone, marked and broken and forsaken. My work here was done, but the larger work, the reformation of werewolf society, was only beginning. Over the following weeks, word spread across all the territories. The Blackthorn Kingdom had fallen. Alpha King Rowan had been overthrown by his own dead Luna, who'd returned as a vessel of the Silver Goddess. The old hierarchies were crumbling, and in their place, something new was rising. I claimed the territory but refused to call myself queen. That word still tasted of the old system, of rulers and subjects, of dominance and submission. Instead, I declared the land a sanctuary, a place where wolves could live free from forced pack bonds, free from cruel alphas, free to choose their own destinies. Wolves came from across the continent, omegas tired of being treated as lesser, betas who'd been caught in the middle of alpha power games, even some alphas, the rare ones who saw the corruption in their own system and wanted better for their children. We built a new society in the ruins of the old. Not perfect, not utopian, but better, fairer, more humane. We kept the traditions worth keeping, the pack bonds formed by genuine love and loyalty, the strength that came from unity. But we threw away the cruelty, the forced submission, the idea that some wolves were inherently worth more than others. Leanna Silverstone appeared one day, drawn by the stories of what I'd done. She was old, ancient even, one of the last true silver wolves before me. She wept when she saw what I'd built, wept with joy that the goddess's bloodline had finally produced someone strong enough to change the world. She taught me more about my power, helped me understand the full scope of what I'd become. I wasn't just a vessel for divine vengeance. I was a bridge between the mortal and divine, a living embodiment of what werewolves could become if they remembered their sacred origins. Months passed. The sanctuary grew. Other territories began to adopt our ways, influenced by the success of our model. The old alpha hierarchy didn't disappear overnight, but it started to change, started to evolve into something less toxic. And one day, a year after I'd destroyed his kingdom, I saw Rowan again. He was at the edge of our territory, standing in the shadows, watching. The mark I'd placed on him was still visible, glowing faintly silver in the darkness. He looked thin, haggard, aged beyond his years. The life of a rogue had not been kind to him. Our eyes met across the distance. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he bowed his head, acknowledging what I'd become, acknowledging his defeat. And then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the forest. I let him go. His punishment was complete. Punishment was, he would live out his days knowing what he'd lost, knowing what he'd thrown away, knowing that the woman he'd tried to murder had not only survived, but thrived beyond anything he could have imagined. That night, I stood alone in the clearing, where my new hall was being built, looking up at the moon. The goddess's presence wrapped around me like a warm cloak, her approval radiating through my very bones. "Did I do right?" I asked her, voicing the doubt that sometimes crept in during quiet moments. The violence, the destruction, the lives lost. Was it worth it? Her voice resonated through my soul, ancient and patient and absolutely certain. You broke the chains that bound thousands. You freed those who had no hope. You showed a corrupt system that there are consequences for cruelty. Yes, daughter, you did right. The world is better for your vengeance, and it will be even better for your mercy going forward. I nodded, accepting her judgment. The goddess of vengeance had done her work. Now it was time to be something else. A leader, a teacher, a symbol of what was possible when you refused to accept the roles others tried to force you into. I thought about the woman I'd been before all this, Ilara Nightshade, the barren Luna, who couldn't meet her mate's expectations. That woman had died in the Deadlands, burned away by divine fire and reforged into something new. I didn't miss her, didn't mourn her passing. She'd been weak because the world had made her weak, had taught her that her only value was in what she could provide to others. But the woman I'd become, the silver goddess who'd torn down kingdoms and rebuilt them better, she was strong because she'd chosen strength, because she'd refused to die quietly, because she'd taken her suffering and transformed it into power and purpose. And that, I realized, was the true gift the goddess had given me. Not just divine power, not just the strength to destroy my enemies, but the understanding that I got to choose who I became, what I stood for, what legacy I left behind. Rowan had tried to make me nothing. Instead, he'd created a goddess. And now, standing amid the ruins of his kingdom and the foundations of my new world, I finally understood what the old saying meant. Werewolves who tried to bury the goddess never realized she was a seed. Final CTA. Thank you for joining me on this journey from death to divinity, from victim to victor, from broken Luna to silver goddess of destruction. Ilara's story is a reminder that sometimes the hardest thing about being betrayed isn't the betrayal itself, but finding the strength to rise from it and become something better than those who tried to destroy you. If this story resonated with you, if it spoke to the part of you that believes in second chances and righteous vengeance, and the power of refusing to stay down, we'd be deeply honored if you'd help us grow the Alpha Destiny Tales community. Your support in reaching our first 1,000 subscribers means we can keep bringing you these powerful transformation stories that celebrate strength, resilience, and the kind of justice that makes you cheer out loud. Remember, you're never as powerless as someone else wants you to believe. Stay fierce, stay silver, and never let anyone make you think you deserve less than everything. Until next time, may the goddess watch over you, and may you find your own path to power.